Na drugom kraju svijeta, s donje strane, nalazi se kontinent na kojem živi najstariji narod na svijetu, Aboriđani. O njima rijetko čujemo, a još manje znamo. No, kad bismo i pokušali saznati, ustanovili bismo da to nije niti najmanje lako, ako je uopće moguće. Jer možda su i sami Aboriđani zaboravili ono što je bitno znati. Tome je svakako pripomogla traumatična prošlost puna institucionaliziranog nasilja od strane došljaka, koje je trajalo sve do prije par desetljeća. Hrvatska arheologinja Vesna Tenodi pokušala je razmaknuti slojeve zaborava, nanose dezinformacija i dokučiti istinu o vremenu sanjanja, vunđinama i svemu ostalome, razlučiti mitologiju od povijesti, što ju je dovelo i do neobičnih pojmova poput spiritualne arheologije. Susret je bio neizbježan ovdje, na rubu znanosti. Dobro večer. Vesna Tenodi, arheologinja koja 1983. živi u Australiji, također je autorica knjiga Dreamtime Set in Stone, a to je razlog po prilici zbog čega smo večeras ovdje. Dobro večer.
Good evening.
Na koji način, s obzirom da se u vašoj knjizi bavite Aboriđinima i ono što se moglo naslutiti o njihovoj kulturi, krenimo od samog početka kada ste i kako došli u dodir s aboriđinskom kulturom, kada ste došli u Australiju prije, evo sad već koliko, 20-30 godina?
28 years to be exact, since 1983. But the first information about Aboriginal culture was during the studies here in Zagreb. And as a prehistorian, I found it fascinating that even today we have a group of people that in some areas of Australia is actually living the same way they used to live 50,000 years ago. So when we migrated to Sydney, my first impulse was to seek career as an archaeologist. And I tried to find out who among Australian archaeologists is researching Aborigines. And it proved to be an impossible task because no one was interested. So in the end, I found Rhys Jones, who was prehistorian dealing with Aboriginal Australian prehistory. I met with him in Canberra, and he was willing to be my mentor for postgraduate studies if I want to go for master's or PhD. But he warned me and he said, the Aboriginal archaeology in Australia is so highly politicized that he was actually unable to do his work. And back in early 80s, it was a matter of total disregard for those tragic people because they were so despised that when he wanted to research certain areas of Australia, he would be told there is nothing there and nothing to worry about, and that area with some potentially precious archaeological material would be flooded to build a new dam. And so he warned me that there is no interest because Australian archaeologists wanted to do much more attractive areas, to go to Egypt, to go to Greece, to Middle East, and that was the impression that there is no archaeology in Australia. So now, if you fast forward 25 years, the government attitude towards Aborigines is completely opposite. And from that extreme of total disregard has swung to another extreme, which makes it every Aboriginal claim, no matter how ludicrous or silly or plain unbelievable, is considered as a gospel. So from the disregard, today's archaeologists don't dare to tell the truth about Aboriginal past for fear of being declared politically incorrect. And I have a personal experience with that because within our project and our art, in a court case which we lost to censor our art, an Australian archaeologist said that even though what we are doing might be the right thing to do, if it upsets Aborigines, it's a bad manners, and we should not tell anything that might potentially make them claim that they are distressed. So, back to your question, my first contact was completely opposite from 25 years later, which means 3 years ago when I started doing a serious research for the book, of course incorporating the bits and pieces of information that I came across over those 25 years when I was busy with other career. And I found some very interesting things which I decided to publish in trilogy to make it manageable for average reader. And the books were done in collaboration with Aboriginal elder and performer Gumbla Vailo, and also with amazing artist Gina Sinozic, who illustrated the book. And she is highly regarded, and her paintings are in major Australian galleries. And within the same project, whose aim was to promote Aboriginal tradition and to pay a tribute to that ancient spirituality, we had a sculptor to carve 8.5-ton sandstone block in order to revive the dying spirituality. So the stone carved was named Wandjina Watches in the Whispering Stone, and every word has a meaning, and stone has 4 sides with image of Wandjina, which is Aboriginal term for celestial beings, for gods in Aboriginal mythology. So one side, black Wandjina, is the teacher, Wandjina of knowledge. Red side is the warrior, Wandjina of courage. The crystal eye side is Wandjina of healing, or the lover. And the plain side is Wandjina of creation, or the sustainer. So that was my involvement in a nutshell from 83 to right now.
Kada pričamo o ovoj knjizi koja nije debela, dakle opsegom nije velika, međutim čini se da taj njen opseg u stvari odražava količinu dostupnih informacija. Kada su odlučili pisati knjigu o Aboriginima, koji su bili prvi koraci i s kakvim rezultatima? Drugim riječima, pretpostavljam da prvo čovjek traži u literaturi, pa da se onda obraća samim živućim nosiocima neke tradicije, jer eto, ovo je rijetka prilika da arheolog istražuje nešto što nije izumrlo jako davno. Kakvi su bili rezultati tih pokušaja i što je na kraju dovelo do jedne knjige koja na neki način je više napravljena kroz intervju? Znači, kad ste prvi put krenuli istraživati činjenice, imali ih, nemali, što kažu sama plemena o svojim povijestima, mogu li se složiti o tome i u kojoj mjeri je to bio materijal koji se mogao upotrijebiti za knjigu?
Actually, the process was quite opposite of what you would expect, or what you mention as a logical process. You do the research and then you compile it and then you put it in some order and publish it. The first impulse came from the Wandjinas themselves, which means from those who know, or the masters of the 6th level, which I put on the first page of the book. I thought it will make it clear to any Aboriginal elder, if there is a such person left in Australia, they will instantly recognize what I'm talking about. That didn't happen. But through my inspired artists, through Gina, through Gumbla, through Ben, I decided to formulate the knowledge that was given to me and combine it with the information available. And information available was researched through contacts with, for example, Aboriginal tourist guides. We would go and hire a guide and ask them, can you take us to a few Aboriginal sites and tell us about your past? And the guide would say, yes, this is very important site where Aboriginal people lived, and this is their shelter, the cave, and the handprints. And I would pick up a stone and I would say, what is this? And the guide would say, oh, that's 20,000-year-old artifact. And I would say, can I take it home? And they would say, no, it's sacred, it must stay here. And I thought it's pretty silly, because 20,000-year-old stone does not lay on the surface. You have to dig quite deeply to reach that level of... And if it's sacred, then that's one more reason to remove it and keep it in a safe place. So we were told a lot of interesting things about local groups, where they live, on their customs. But we were also told a lot of rubbish. And I called the Department of Environment, who is the main body issuing licenses to tourist guides. And another most important thing was that the average tourist guide, after a few minutes of telling you about the past and how Aborigines were making fire by rubbing two sticks together and making a juice from local plants and flowers, a few minutes into the conversation, there would be hate coming through, saying, and then the invaders came and they started killing us, and white people destroyed our And I thought this is not a job of Aboriginal guide to poison the mind of any tourist with tragic past, which we all acknowledged happened. No one is denying that they were treated appallingly. But it's very inappropriate when tourists come to enjoy Australia to listen to Aboriginal hate against white people. So I called the department and said, do you know that your guides are saying the most inappropriate things? And they would say, we are aware of that, but that's what they are. There is nothing we can do about it. This is democracy. People can say what they want. But if you start inciting hate, then it should get someone's attention. And that same hate was then directed at our artists. And we were accused of all sorts of things because Aborigines want to claim ownership of prehistoric imagery. And that prehistoric imagery includes these Wandjina figures that I mentioned, which are very specific and only found in one part of Australia, which is called the Kimberley, in the caves that were researched by Europeans in late 18th, 19th century. And those figures, you can see them here. They're like ghosts with huge black eyes and a crown. And as soon as we started exploring that imagery, prehistoric symbols, we had few Aborigines screaming, it belongs to them. That actual image and idea of God belongs to them, and that we are stealing their gods, and that we have no right to do it. So I don't know what to say other than that symbol is widely exploited on any souvenir, and any souvenir shop in all over Australia is flooded with these. And then if that were true, what they are saying, then it would be only done by one tribe. And if you look at the back of this painting, you see that it was done by 3 Aborigines from Victoria, from New South Wales and from Queensland, not one from Western Australia.
This is the sound of the past.
Dobro, vratit ćemo se još kasnije na to mjesto koje se zove Modrogorje, gdje se inače i proizvode, da tako kažemo, ova umjetnička djela vezana uz Aborigine. Mislim da bismo trebali ipak hrvatske gledatelje upoznati sa jednom nedavnom povešću Aborigina i preokretima koji su se dogodili, s obzirom na to ipak za nas sasvim drugi kraj svijeta. Naime, što se zbivalo, a o tome vaš sugovornik Gumbla u knjizi priča detaljno, kakve su bile sudbine Aborigina sve do prije, sve do kraja 60-ih čak, kroz što su oni prolazili, kakve efekte naravno ta trauma imala na njih i kada je došao taj dan koji se u Australiji zove Sorry Day i što on podrazumijeva.
Their past was tragic, and they were the best way to illustrate the attitude towards Aborigines is during the nuclear tests in the desert, when those conducting the experiments were asking, is there any population in that part of the world that we need to warn to get out of there? And the official report said, no, there is nothing there, only flora and fauna, which means they consider those tribes to be part of the landscape, nothing to worry about. So
Mislim, bliska povijest Aboriđana se ponekad može vidjeti u zadnje vrijeme u nekim filmovima koje očito su sad nekako je politički podobno vrijeme da se oslikava to. Međutim, to je povijest razdvajanja obitelji, to je povijest seksualnog nasilja po domovima kojim su bili izloženi skoro bez iznimke svi. Dakle, govorimo o djeci od 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 godina i slično. Dakle, o čemu se u stvari radilo? Kakav je to bio program posrijedi?
Well, that was an appalling part of history, and no one is denying that. Even though there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is that the missionaries have done a wonderful job in educating and civilizing those tribes, and that they were actually saving the children, because children were usually sexually abused from very early age. Then Aborigines would say that it's a part of their tradition, it's their custom, and it's if the entire tribe is raping a little girl, it prepares her for marriage. And the ludicrous theory is that they would say it's our custom, that's how we've been doing it. So the missionaries would take the children to educate them, to learn them what clothes is and what hygiene is and what food preparation is. And another school of thought is that they were taken with intention to separate families and to grow them as Westerners, so they would forget their origin and their tribes and their customs, because those customs were considered to be very cruel customs, Stone Age customs, including payback rule, which means if they don't like someone, they kill them. And so in order to change them, they thought the best way to do it is to educate children. And so if for their parents it's too late to change their habits, so when you say, there was a lot of people, like in every situation, when you give too much power to one person, they will abuse it. So at some missions, children were abused. And Gumbla is one of those abused kids. And his experience was so dreadful that he became a drug addict and alcoholic and then turned to crime. But after a few years in jail, he had epiphany, or he saw the light and he transformed completely. And he has an Irish wife, and they have 6 children, and it's a lovely family.
Ali koliko sam primijetio, to je iznimka, jer sam Gumbla priča da je on zapravo iz svog doma dječaka jedini preživjeli, s obzirom da su svi do 25. godine umrli ili od droge, ili od alkohola, ili od zatvora, i on je bio u toj opasnosti, jer su zapravo traume koje su se vraćale u noćne morama bile takve da doista danas čovjek u Australiji kad vidi Aboriđine uglavnom su u alkoholiziranom stanju ili prosjači ili slično. Međutim, riječ je o tom da se očito skoro, znači sustavno, svake noći su se doživljavale, djeca su, kako je opisano u knjizi, zapravo čekala kog će ta noć izabrati da mogu ostatak noći mirno spavati. I u stvari to stavilo jednu ogromnu traumu zbog koje se čak i nije začuditi taj pomak klatno u drugu stranu, gdje sad Aboriđini pak ne mogu se i dalje nositi s tim, pa čak izražavaju i određenu mržnju. Mislim da ste napravili nekakav rad koji se zove Social Impact of Aborigine Hate.
But Gumbla thought he should not be exception, he should be a rule, and his life should be a role model, an example to Aboriginal people what to pay attention to. And that's why, if you noticed, he repeatedly points out education as the key. And everything he said, he wanted to tell the truth, tragic truth, as a constructive criticism, in order to inspire his people to follow what he has done, to overcome the grief, to overcome the trauma, and to lead a well-integrated, purposeful, meaningful life as a responsible member of Australian society. Not to seek division and to seek exceptional treatment and to stay in that victim role, because he thinks it's very dangerous to stay a victim, and you want everyone, you start screaming, you are offended, you are distressed, and like obnoxious child, the government will give you a candy just to shut you up, you know, in this case, $1 million or $1 billion.
Kad smo već kod toga što vlada sad daje, kad je došlo do toga što se u Australiji zove Sorry Day, odnosno dan žao nam je, mogli bismo tako prevesti. Što je on podrazumijevao i kako je to sad pak dovelo do te neke nove političke korektnosti gdje odjednom sami Aboriđani, eto u knjizi to Gumbla spominje često puta antropolozima kad dođu istraživati, priču razne izmišljotine, šaljive stvari, poslije se smiju kako su svašta izmislili, kako ti bijeli ljudi sve vjeruju i marljivo zapisuju i slično. A s druge strane, sam Gumbla kaže da iza toga zapravo stoje da su oni sami već zaboravili bitne stvari, pa onda to svoje neznanje skrivaju iza riječi kao to je tajna, to je sveto znanje i slično. Međutim, očigledno da se dosta toga izgubilo i iskrivljava kroz ovakve priče. I vidim da ste pokušali napraviti pokušaj sinteze nečeg zajedničkog među svim tim plemenima, nekog običaja, nekog temelja, pa i to je se pokazalo sklidskim terenom. Skoro da nema temelja na kojem bi se moglo to fokusirati. Drugim riječima, što je taj Sorry Day donio Aboriginima u praksi, a što u namjeri? Što se htjelo, a što se postiglo?
Gumbla is, he is a lovely performer, and when he plays didgeridoo, it's magic experience. But in conversation, you need to encourage him, and he doesn't talk much, but he can sum up the truth in a sentence. And about Aborigines and how they interpret their own culture to anyone who asks, including researchers, he just said, it's all smoke and mirrors, big fat lie. So most of that is made up, and every person can interpret it whichever way they want, because we don't remember. I don't remember, my tribe doesn't remember, other tribe, we simply do not remember. And the Sorry Day, 3 years ago, was an official acknowledgement of the injustice that Aboriginal people suffered in the past. And our then Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, made an official apology that we all applauded to. Entire Australia was delighted that finally Aboriginal people are equals with all the opportunities that the rest of us enjoyed and with all the goodwill. So we were all very sympathetic to Aboriginal cause, because we didn't know that soon they are going to start to abuse that privilege, newly gained privilege, that they are going to very quickly say, so now this is the payback time, meaning now you are going to pay for all the injustice you have been doing to us over 200 years. And when you consider that Australia is truly a multicultural society with 220 nationalities, and that only now Aboriginal population, which forms 2% of the entire population, has the power to dictate the politics, the policy, and because of it's incredible, and it's very painful and offensive to any migrant when they say, you stole our land, because we haven't stolen anything. We migrated and we built the country, and land was not stolen, it was uninhabited. And it was mishandled, of course, because the colonizers 200 years ago could have had perhaps different methods, but they didn't. And yet it's not our fault. And when someone is insulting you personally, like me and my artists, and in most vulgar terms and most violent terms, and making threats, including death threats, and saying you stupid Croat to go back to your country, or saying that vilifying entire Croatian community in Australia, it really upsets people, because they want to be acknowledged too, as those who brought civilization to that continent, who built it. And they invited Aborigines to integrate. And they say, no, no, this is the payback time. You only want, again, to take advantage of us. And in response, the government, following the Sorry Day, returned, well, a lot earlier. It started a lot earlier than that, back in early 90s. They started returning huge parts of Australia to Aboriginal people to manage it and to live there and to, according to their customs. And Gumbla was also ridiculing that and said this is completely wrong policy, you know, to make a division, like separation. This is Aboriginal and this is mainstream. And if anyone wants to live in their traditional way, they should go there and stop exploiting the benefits of civilization. Meaning they should strip naked, run through the forest in direct contact with their maker, and they should stop trying to enforce their customary law onto mainstream society. But because of this new political correctness, when any Aborigine is treated as a sacred cow, basically, whatever they say is regarded as a must for government to indulge them in. So I saw Gumbla as a hero, as a very brave, courageous man who invited his people to start to apply reason and some common sense, and to see that anger and hate are not going to solve anything.
This is the sound of the future.
Kad smo već kod Gumble, ima on ponešto za reći i o tom Sorry Dayu, jer naravno Sorry Day, kao što već se obično velike vlade ili korporacije ispričavaju, kada se ispričavaju, one to rade novcem. Drugim riječima, no ponekad novac nije baš sasvim dovoljan, a naravno nameće se i pitanje kako te novac i u kojoj mjeri završi. To mi svi znamo, imamo po cijelom svijetu ta iskustva sa donacijama, ne znam, za Hrvatsku ili za negdje, koje završavaju tako da se plati mađarski hotel, američki predavač, austrijski autoprevoznik, a domaći čovjek dobi, znači, uvjetno rečeno znanje, ako se to ne bi moglo nazvati programiranjem. Koliko sam primijetio, država se uglavnom kroz taj Sorry Day određenim svotama novca ispričava Aboriginima, oni pritom moraju potpisati da neće više sad tu ništa puno oko toga gnjaviti. Onda se dogodi i kontraefekt poput onog kom je pričao Gumbla, dok je on kao pošteni svirač didgeridua koji od toga zarađuje, zapravo ljudi koji dobivaju novac tek sad nemaju poticaj da išta u stvari rade, a da ne pričamo o tome da puno novca odlazi na samo održavanje tih istih institucija koje u stvari bi trebale prosuđivati taj novac Aboriginima. Treba platiti avionske karte, prevoze, konferencije i na kraju od 300 stanova izgrade se 2 i slično. Drugim riječima, Sorry Day, on nije doživio kao dan isprike, uglavnom kao dan birokratskog potpisivanja formulara i slično. Imali Sorry Day, znači osim, može li se reći da je zapravo to uspjeli projekt ili...
Well, it's called tokenism or lip service. When you do something just to appear to be doing something, but then you follow a path of least resistance by throwing money, $3.5 billion a year to solve Aboriginal disadvantage, to be exact. And then a few years later, you realize that all those projects are failing, which means taxpayers' money are being thrown for something that is not working. And nobody is asking why it's not working, why Aboriginal people don't want to participate, why they resent the mainstream society so much, why they want to stay isolated. And our response, there is so many very smart people who are criticizing the current state of political correctness, and there are politicians like Gary Jones, who was advisor to former government for 10 years, very well versed in Aboriginal problems. And he was saying that that politics of Aboriginal self-determination, which means give them money, give them power, give them everything, has backfired. It's not working. It's time to stop. You have art historians like Donald Richardson, who has been pointing out the problems with Aboriginal art, for example, how wrong it is to separate Australian art into Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, because it either is or it's not. Or what we are creating, what does it mean that Gina's paintings, because she's a Croat, does it mean it's Croatian art, even though it explores prehistoric themes, which are not Aboriginal, which are pre-Aboriginal? They were left to them from an earlier race.
Dobro, kad smo već spomenuli umjetnost, malo moramo ipak se informirati o tome. Što je to Modrogorje? Što se tamo radi?
Modrogorje is our dream. From the dream time and also the dream time. I mean, if you Google dream time, you will not find information. What is it? You will find something very simplified, like it's a collection of Aboriginal stories that is talking about creation. Or Aborigines would say, oh, that's the time before the time. But information I have is that's the time in between time. And that's in the book, and that was illustrated, and no one asked, what does it mean? And What was your question?
Pitanje je bilo što je to Modrogorje i čime se tamo bavite?
And Modrogorje was an idea because that region next to Sydney, 2 hours drive, is called Blue Mountains. And on top of the mountains there is a village called Katoomba on the road to one of the most popular lookouts in Australia called Three Sisters, with 2 million tourists passing by every year. So we bought an old house and renovated to open the gallery and run wellness center. And in front of the gallery, our sculptor carved the stone with those Aboriginal prehistoric mythological beings called Aborigines. So Modrogorje is at the moment dysfunctional, shut down temporarily because the local council decided to censor our art and order us to remove the sculpture because few local Aborigines claim it's offensive.
To je sad znači dio te jedne nove političke korektnosti u kojoj se zapravo zbiva to, koliko sam shvatio, kako su krenule ovi umjetnički prikazi inspirirani zidnim crtežima od prije 10 i više tisuća godina. Pojavili su se razne sudske prijetnje, Aboriđini i njihovi odvjetnici. I naravno opet se zapravo dogovorilo, ako sam dobro shvatio, da su opet neaboriđinski odvjetnici pokupili sav novac, kako to već ide, ne? Koji inače bio namijenjen Aboriđinima, ali između ostalog su oni se pozivali na razne stvari koje malo i čudno doista zvuči, recimo copyright, s obzirom da se radi o pećinskoj umjetnosti staroj 10.000 godina i slično. U kojoj mjeri i zbog čega su oni tako se zapravo, ako sam dobro shvatio, okomili na to što umjetnička jedna kolonija, nazovemo je australska, koristi njihove motive? Koji su bili njihovi, znači, povodi, izgovori i što su time htjeli?
Well, as one of our great supporters, Doctor of Political Science Paul White, when he analyzed our problem in his article, he said, because we are convenient target, because we are so small, we are just, you know, a couple running their own business, and they thought it's very easy to walk all over us. They're not going to attack a huge importer of cheap replicas or souvenirs from China or Philippines or Malaysia.
Ili recimo krasne kineske suvenire.
And these are made in China, these in Sydney, some are in Philippines or Malaysia, and this reads Australia. There is no mention of Aboriginal art, no reference to Aborigines whatsoever. But because those are multi-million-dollar businesses and powerful people, there is nothing they can do about it.
Ali što ih zapravo smeta? To je ovako teško iz ove perspektive shvatiti, s obzirom da se radi o prikazima likova sa stijena starima. Što kažu?
Well, for the last 20 or even more, since Margaret Preston back in the 20s or 30s, they claim that non-Aboriginal artists are not allowed to do Aboriginal art. Aboriginal art, in this case, meaning Aboriginal themes. And I mean, first you find it incredible that someone should say that prehistoric art belongs to someone or that they have copyright. They try that because people are uninformed and just take it for granted. And we had to fight for 10 months until it became common knowledge that those are lies. There is no copyright on prehistoric art. It's in public domain. Every artist is free to use those symbols and imagery. So Modrogorje, apart from Gina and Ben, attracted other artists who were appalled by idea of politics dictating art. So one of them is now within our spiritual art collection, creating work comparing our case with using of those celestial beings, or named in Aboriginal mythology as Aborigines, comparing with all other people or representatives of the divine who suffered through the ages. So actually, I'm very happy, even though, you know, some are very explicit, some are very straightforward, but some are pretty mysterious because, for example, this one reads Imbi, I-N-B-Y. Nobody knows what it means, nobody asks, because nobody...
Da vidimo sljedećeg oka tog stvora.
And this is the sky god, is the main Vongina, is the big kahuna, is the top god. And when I said I talk to gods, they said we'll kill you, instead of asking what do they say. So our artist Graham, who is part Maori from New Zealand, he decided to illustrate that, because our experiences are now illustrated in images. And he said, no matter how loud he speaks and how hard he tries, and these people will keep turning away, pretending not to see it, you know, elephant in the room. Aborigines, we pretend not to see the problem. With the divine, we pretend not to hear it, or perhaps we are really grown so insensitive that most people cannot hear or understand what the message is.
But before peace, there must be justice.
Kad pričamo o copyrightu, imalo bi se, ako sam dobro shvatio, tu još što god za reći. Naime, prilikom istraživanja za knjigu, očito je da postoje još uvijek dokumentirani zapisi za koje ste rekli da nije tako teško doći do njih kad znate da postoje prvih istraživača u Australiji koji su prvi sa aboriđenima šetali i oni su im pokazivali razne crteže i slično. To bi se mogli zvati najvjerodostojnijim izvornim iskrenim zapisima, tad još ništa nije bilo kontaminirano. Kakve informacije o podrijetlu tih crteža dolaze iz vremena tih prvih susreta Došljaka i Aboriđana?
Absolutely, you put it well. It was not contaminated. So Aborigines were not, today they are advised by hundreds and hundreds of lawyers who are telling them what they should say and what they should think in order to gain more benefits. But early researchers going with the tribes, living with tribes and asking their guides to explain the paintings in caves, were told that these imagery, meaning Wandjina figures, we never painted them. And the researchers would ask, so how did they get here? And the guide would say, different theories. Actually, gods themselves imprinted, after they finished creating the world, they imprinted their image here for us to see. So from the first researchers to as recently as December last year, 2010, when the director of Australian National Museum, Margot Neal, she went to Vatican to open Aboriginal art exhibition, and she said, among other paintings or examples in this priceless collection, there are some Wandjina figures, and Wandjinas are gods that Aborigines never created, and they have a number of legends saying they arrived from the sea, from the sky. And today's interpretation is very simplistic, that Wandjina is a rainmaker, and his power comes down through the nose. That's all you can get from an Aborigine. And they would say, and they never have a mouth. If they had a mouth, it would be raining constantly, earth would be flooded, and that was the main terrible sin, punishable by death, and that caused threats that they will drag us through courts because it's inexcusable to paint Wandjina with a mouth. Even though in my book I say it does have a mouth at certain moments of crisis and with certain reasons when it's time for gods to speak up. And last initiate among Aborigines was Charlie Namambo, who was Aboriginal man from the Kimberley, which means from the tribe that today is claiming that they are never painted with the mouth. And he painted Wandjinas exclusively with the mouth because that was also a crucial moment. That was a moment when Aborigines did win all the rights, and after that became the most privileged segment of Australian society. So apart from Wandjina figures, there is also Bradshaw figures, also pre-Aboriginal, a group of art that was discovered by a researcher. Surname was Bradshaw, that's why they are called Bradshaw figures.
Koja je razlika između njih?
These are very static, unmoving, imposing, huge figures. Bradshaw are very elegant, like dancers on the wall. Perhaps you can see something similar here. They're like stick figures. And they're tiny in comparison, and Aborigines themselves, in their language, they call it gion gion, which is the name of a bird with a long beak. And the researchers would ask them why, and they say because it looks, these are rubbish paintings, someone left it here, the previous race, and we found them when we arrived, but it looks as if the bird pecked with the beak, on it's nothing. And to show disregard, they would just paint over it on the spot. And that was documented in those researchers' diaries.
Dobro, kad su se već stari ti Aborigini prije 100-200 godina odrekli autorskog prava na tim slikama, znali se danas, imate li kakvu ideju tko ih je nacrtao, ako nisu već sami bogovi to ucrtali u stijene? Koji bi bili to prethodnici? Na kraju krajeva, ako baš pošteno hoćemo govoriti na ovoj našoj zemljici u zadnjih 100 milijuna godina, svi su došljaci. Svatko od negdje nekud stigao, nitko nije bio prvi tu. Pa pretpostavljam da slično vredi za Australiju. Tko je tamo bio prethodnik tih koje danas smatramo najstarijima?
I love the way you put it, you know, when you say the gods themselves. Yeah, I'll ask Graham to draw an illustration of Vonjina painting himself on a cave. No, but you know, kidding aside, the previous race means the race that inhabited the Australian continent when Aborigines arrived, which is like 50,000 years ago. And they found then indigenous population, or population of that time, which, according to my information, is called Abrajanes. Aborigines means ab-origins, which means from the beginning, which is wrong because they were not there from the beginning, they migrated there. At the continent, they were Abrajanes, which means from the Rajanes, because when they migrated 3 million years ago, they found the race of the Rajani. And the Rajanes are the first people of Australia, or of the continent that included what is today Australia. So Abrajanes, fusing with Aborigines, migrating tribes, and trying to pass on their esoteric knowledge onto the newcomers, embracing them and sharing, because they were highly spiritual and civilized people. They left the symbols, the icons, iconography as a reminder. And God is not, this is not the image that should be considered. It's what it represents, what it means, what the symbols stand for. But there is no dialogue, there is no willingness to listen, there is no attempt to understand.
Kada pričamo dakle, o tim zaboravljenim ezoteričnim znanjima koje, kao što smo vidjeli, zapravo su i sami Aboriđani već pomalo zaboravili, dolazimo tu do jednog termina koji također povremeno u povijesti arheologije nije bilo rijetko slučajeva kad su se ljudi koristili egzotičnim metodama, pogotovo 70-ih, 80-ih su arheolozi mnogi koristili vidomljake na određenim mjestima koji su oslikavali gdje bi se nalazile koje kuće, kakve su bile frizure i slično. Međutim, to nije u punom smislu ono što biste vi nazvali spiritualnom arheologijom. A što bi uopće spiritualna arheologija bila? Jer u kontekstu Aboriđana zapravo imamo splet izgubljenih priča, splet crteža. Evo zapravo jedino što zaista postoji jest ta specifična umjetnost koja je odmah prepoznatljiva i oko koje se sada vode koplja, smije li se ona crtati, ne smije i slično. Ne? Prema tome, ništa nam drugo nije preostaje nego da pogledamo šta još postoji na meniju. Što bi to bila spiritualna arheologija koju također spominjete u knjizi?
Now we are coming to the area that brings smile to my face. You're talking about tragic past, about dangerous political correctness, about threats and legal threats and bankruptcy threats and all the horrible things that we experienced. But all the while, we were not entangled into those disputes with doing nothing, because at the same time, we continued with our work, and our work, other than art and art projects, which are going on also in Croatia and in Zagreb, the area we want to explore and which is our priority is spiritual archaeology. And I realized that in Australia it's a known term. And I mean, even archaeology is a known term because archaeologists don't dare to say what they think because their only source of income is writing reports in support of land claims. So when I approached them and asked them, but why do you keep, hiding facts about the past, they would say because then we can kiss our career goodbye. So even archaeology is very strange, or understanding of it, but spiritual archaeology is completely disregarded. And few spiritual archaeologists that I know, one is here in Vienna, I mean nearby, and another one is Michael Kresimir. In Vienna is Klaus Dona, and in the mountains there is one amateur, not professional archaeologist, but who is researching Aboriginal past, and his theories are ridiculed. To shut him up, you can shut people up with threats or with ridicule, or there are many ways to, or by silence, just ignoring their work.
Dobro, spomenuli ste Klausa Donu i Michaela Kresimira i slično. Što jeste onda spiritualna arheologija u biti?
Again, it depends. If you look for definition, the definition that usually goes with term spiritual archaeology is it is the research or inquiry about the spiritual origin of man. But it's never one thing, it's always a combination of things. It is also an archaeology inspired, spiritual means inspired from the spirit with the divine guidance or in consultation with the divine. And the science frowns on that and thinks it's a terrible thing to say, forgetting that all the major discoveries were made by inspired archaeologists such as Heinrich Schliemann, who discovered Troy because he believed that there is some truth to Homer's poems, or that Carter, who discovered the Tutankhamun's pyramid, that was highly inspired. So there is always a conflict between the conventional science and researchers and inspired archaeologists who are spiritual archaeologists, because they have guidance from other levels and from the cosmic beings, or at least some of them. But that's the only area of archaeology that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in research. I'm interested in work not like those others, because each of us has their own methods, and some collect artifacts that are unexplained, and they try to put it together and find the truth behind those unexplained findings. Some are very disciplined mind. We order it in research-like style books, and some of us want to speak through art. And I personally think that art is a wonderful way to reach people, and it speaks to the viewer. It has immediate impact, and that's important to me, because this is the tipping point in the time before upheaval, a great readjustment, as it's called, 5 to 12. It's the last moment for people to wake up. That's why we run an art performance entitled "Dreamtime is over. It's time to wake up." So I hope that people will stop asking, why don't you do more research? More research should be done, and there are wonderful things to be discovered in Australia once the politicians allow it to be researched. But what now? And that was the main reason why Aborigines decided to speak again, to cascade that knowledge that is essential for spiritual survival of mankind. So it's really urging people to reconsider their priorities and this given moment, and to stop bickering and to start sharing and cooperating. And that's why I think art projects are a wonderful way to engage people. And our Aboriginal Watchers in the Whispering Stone was a reconciliation piece with invitation for Aborigines to participate, because it was meant for their benefit. So we still hope it will all turn out well, and they will ask what can we do and how can we contribute to reviving this spirituality if we want to help the mankind as a whole.
Vesna, hvala vam. Do neke sljedeće prilike. kad opet nam vratite ovdje na ovu sjevernu polutku, gdje vam je možda malo čudno sve naopačke, ali upravo onako kako ste ostavili 1983. Dakle, evo, nekad davno Aboriđini kažu postojalo vrijeme sanjanja. Čini se da su i oni sami nekako uz veliku pomoć bijelih došljaka zaboravili o čemu se tu radi, pa se danas tek oporavljaju od 2 stoljeća sustavnog zlostavljanja od najranije dobi i od njihove kolektivne amnezije. I tko zna zapravo kako je to vrijeme sanjanja uopće bilo i na koji se dio povijesti ljudskog roda odnosi i što ono u stvari govori. I tko zna, možda je to vrijeme sanjanja, taj dream time iz tradicije, zamijenilo vrijeme spavanja, sleep time, pa kao što se smjenjuju dan i noć, možda nakon spavanja dolazi vrijeme buđenja, nekakav wake up time. To naravno nikad nije lako, u glavi zuji, oči su krmeljave, čovjek bi se najradije okrenuo na drugu stranu i nastavio spavat, ali ne može jer sunce blješti kroz prozor. Ali u ovom trenutku samo mjeseci i zvijezde. Laku noć.